Good morning. I just woke up. Happy birthday to my mommy. Would have been 63 today. I told you yesterday I was going to talk a little bit about her today, about what happened. It actually started before my YouTube time. I think it was like 2004, 2005, the first time when it all started. She got really obsessed with eating ice chips and drinking water, and she started to have put on a lot of water weight. Like, she was laying on the couch one day, sitting back. I'm like, Mom, you need to go to the doctor because something's not right. I said, look at your stomach. Look at mine. Mine's gushy. Yours is like hard, firm. Something's not right, Mom. But she was so freaking hard-headed. And finally, she'd retained so much water, it just started to seep out of her legs. And I'm like, now you have to go to the doctor. So she went. And he's like, yeah, you're retaining water. We have to make sure you're, I don't know what all happened there because she went by herself. They wrapped her legs, and she was restricted by what she could drink and the ice she could take in. And things never got much better. And it seems like it's all kind of a blur. Because it blurs, man. I remember her mentality started to waver to where she was confused a lot, and she gave strange answers, and she had an appointment to go see a doctor that was near here, a specialist. And Grandma came over, and Dad went, and they got her in the Trailblazer and took her to the doctor. And when they came back, Dad's like, he's sending her to the hospital, which I kind of knew was going to happen because something was not right. So Dad and Grandma and him went to the hospital in St. Joe, Michigan. That's where he sent her. And this is also sketchy in my mind, this one, because it was just all so crazy. I know I went up that next morning, and Mom was not doing well. She almost passed away at this time. She went through a really bad phase. They ended up putting her in a medical coma, putting her on dialysis because her kidneys weren't functioning because of the liver. Because kidneys are very delicate. They'll stop just because. They're mad. They're like, well, if they're freaking out, I'm freaking out too. But the doctor had come in late the next night after they ran all these tests and stuff, and we had like a whole room full of people. My cousins drove down from the Upper Peninsula. They drove 8 hours, and we had a whole room full of people, and the doctor came in, and he asked for the family of my mom, and we're like, we're all it. And he came to me and Dad, and we're talking to us, and he said the first question he asked was, is your mom a drinker? He looked at me, and I'm like, no. I said, she might drink a wine cooler once a year, but she's not a drinker. And he's like, she has cirrhosis of the liver, and since she's not a drinker, it's the kind that we don't know how it's caused. They don't know what causes it if you're not a drinker. So her liver was diseased, which in effect freaked out her kidneys. So that's when they put her in the coma to calm her body down. He said what she has on her side right now is her age. She's young, because she was only 54, 55 when this happened. So they had her in a coma for a few days, and they left her on the slow dialysis, and that was just the freakiest thing, going back into ICU. And she looked dead. She was just, it's freaky. And then you see all her blood going into this machine. It was just the weirdest thing. And so we'd stay there all day, and then I would come home at night. Dad would stay there all night. I got the burpees. I don't know why, because I haven't even eaten or drinking anything yet. So after about 2 or 3 days, I called, and Dad's like, hey, listen. And he handed the phone to my mom, and my mom talked to me. I'm like, oh, Mama, you're awake. And she's like, yeah, I'm awake. Through the night, they had weaned her off of the medicine and woke her up, and they took the thing out of her throat, and they got her talking, and I was shocked. And by that evening, they were letting her eat something, and it was awesome. And when she first went in the hospital, we had planned on having our bathroom remodeled. So when she was in the hospital, our bathroom was stripped out. So we were staying at Grandma's a lot because we didn't have any shower and stuff here. So we'd go to her house. And when Mom got out of the hospital, she was probably in 2 weeks, maybe the first time or so. They put ports in her chest because she had to do dialysis because her kidneys needed help. And she did dialysis for like 3 months. And then she finally got, her kidneys were functioning well, and she got to have the ports out and all that good stuff. And when she got out of the hospital, she went to stay at Grandma's house. And Dad and I would go out and stay there also sometimes. And she had a little setback after she'd been out for like a week. The toxins in her liver started to build up again, and she would just... Dad and I took her to dialysis one night, and I'm like, Dad, I think after dialysis you might have to take her to the hospital. Because she was just silly. She would just talk about some of the craziest things. And so we dropped off at dialysis at like 7, and she had to be on it until like 11. Or was it we dropped her off at 6 and she got off at 11? This is in the evening. And when he picked her up from dialysis, I had gone home. And he went to go pick her up from dialysis, and I fell asleep. And I thought, well, he'll call me if he takes her to the hospital. And he picked her up and took her straight to the hospital. And that next morning, I'm like, called Grandma's house. I'm like, where's Dad at? And he goes, he took your mom to the hospital last night. I'm like, why did no one call and tell me this? So I head back to the hospital, and she had to take this, I don't know what it was, but it was like a syrup, a clear syrup that she had to take that was supposed to help with the toxins in her liver. She hated that stuff. She didn't like it. But there were times afterwards that I'm like, have you taken it today? I don't like that stuff. I'm like, well, you gotta take it anyway. Take it. But they had given her a huge dose of that at the hospital, which cleans you out a little bit. Makes you go to the bathroom. And so she was in for a couple days, and they got her straightened out. And the doctor told us some tests for us, like when we think something's happening, the doctor says, tell her to do palms up. And I'm like, Mom, do palms up. And she had to go like hold her hands straight out in front of her like this with her palms up. And most people can do it and just do it really still, but if her toxins were getting high, she would shake. She couldn't control her hands, they would shake. And so the doctor would come in and make her do the palms up test, and when the toxins were getting lower, she didn't shake as much. And so we got her straightened out there, and then she got into a pre-liver transplant program because her liver wasn't diseased enough for her to have a transplant right then, but they wanted to keep track of it. So every 6 months she would go to Chicago, to the University of Chicago Hospital, and they would do tests and make sure things were okay. So after that whole brouhaha, because this was in the winter this all happened. It was like right after New Year's, January, because she was on dialysis January, February, March, and she got off like late March. And so, like when she went in the hospital, when they did dialysis, she lost 80 to 100 pounds of just water weight. That's how much water her body had just held on to. It was crazy. It was crazy. So she started to feel better. Not 100%. I don't think she was ever 100% after that, ever. And then fast forward to 2008, when I was on YouTube at the time, and they'd gone on a trip. They went on an Easter trip. They went to New Jersey and with Larry and Joni, and they went to visit their daughter and son-in-law in the Air Force, and then Dad and Mom traveled down to Georgia to see family, and came home. They went on almost a 2-week trip, and so she got home right after Easter, because Easter had happened like in March that year, the end of March. And she wasn't feeling good. She had a cold. And so she had that for a while. And then I noticed when she would sit on the couch, she would flinch. I'm like, what's up with you? And she's like, I think the cold settled in my leg. Stupidest thing I ever heard. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I have a pain in my leg, and I didn't think anything of it. And then finally, one day, a few days later, she sat in Dad's recliner, laid down all day, and didn't get up and use the restroom, so I knew something wasn't functioning right. And she was starting to get, she was starting to act strange. So we finally got her up to go to the bathroom, and she couldn't even stand. Dad had to hold her, and she couldn't stand. And we got in the hallway, and I'm like, I'm calling 911. Mom's like, no, just lay me on the couch. If I lay down, I'll feel better tomorrow. And the doctor flat out told us he said if we had done that, she probably would have been dead on the couch the next morning. So I called 911. I screamed at her. I'm like, I am calling 911. I said, go. We sat her in a chair in the kitchen, and she finally just went and just knew it was time. I think she knew she should have gone to the doctor before this happened. She was just so freaking hard-headed. And so yeah, it was just another like 3 weeks sitting at the hospital. It was crazy. Who's calling at 9 o'clock in the morning? A number I don't know. What's with the numbers that I don't know? So let's just say this time it did not end well. She was 57, and same doctor in the ICU was there, and you know, he took us in that little meeting room, and you know, he's writing on the board, you know, she has this and this and this and this, and if this all adds up, it all equals to not surviving. Someone's trying to fax something. Who would be faxing something? So he wanted to prepare us that it's bad. It was bad. He said it was bad last time, but he said it's really bad this time. And what had happened is she got an infection in her thigh, a fasciitis infection, that flesh-eating kind of infection. And they took her back for surgery and cut out a chunk of her thigh. And that infection had gotten so bad in her body that since her liver was diseased, it couldn't process it. And so it was just building up inside. And that's really what ended up being the fatal moment, is the infection. Infection is no joke, man. Pooh, buddy, let me tell you. And then bilirubin, I hate that word, because that was all they kept watching her bilirubin count at the hospital. And you know, if it gets to a certain level, you need a transplant, and you need it now. And the bilirubin number kept going into areas it wasn't supposed to go, and they're like, well, maybe once the infection settles down and starts going away, the numbers will change. But they never started to go the opposite direction. And so we kept trying to get Chicago to take her, but they're like, as long as there's infection involved, we can't take her, because we can't do a transplant when there's infection. Understandable. So finally they got her to a point to where there was no sign of infection. They had a wound vac on her thigh, trying to heal the wound, the chunk they cut out of her thigh. Her mental state was fine. She still had a tube in her throat, so she could not talk. I know if I've frozen at any particular time and sound like a demon during this video, I'm sorry, because I'm not even paying attention to the screen. But when they asked her questions, she could answer yes and no, and she knew all the answers. And finally, one day we're all sitting there, and the nurse came in and said, Chicago said yes. They're taking her. They're taking her. So we're all excited. I'm like, oh, great. They're taking her. She get a transplant. And so we gather all the stuff, and they told us, you know, go home, gather your things. They're going to get her ready and transport her. And they will call us when she gets on the road. I don't know if she went by ambulance or helicopter. I don't remember. I want to say ambulance. So we went home and Dad called our cousins who live in the Chicagoland area and told them, and he was going to go stay with them, which isn't very far from the hospital. And so they get over there one night, and the next day, one of the transplant doctors calls the house looking for Dad, and I said, well, he's on his way to Chicago right now. And I was talking to her, and she was very nice, and she's like, I want to be honest with you. I said, your mom is not strong enough for a transplant right now, but we're trying to get her there. We have a lot of things to deal with before we can even think about the transplant right now. And I said, I understand that. And she was very nice. And I said, yeah, Dad should be getting there in sometime here in the next few hours. I said, he'll be up at the hospital. She's like, okay, I will look for him here. And he gets there and goes. Well, the next morning, I was going to go on the weekend because the weekend was just a couple days away. And the next morning, I go to work. I hadn't been to work in like 3 weeks. And because I needed something to do I needed something to do. I sat down. I'd been to work like an hour. And my dad calls crying. He goes, you have to come. Your mom did not have a good night. You just have to come now. So I said, I got to go. I come home. I print out a map to my cousins. I called my cousin Roy. He went with me. And we get to my cousins. Jump in my mom's vehicle. Roy drives us downtown to the hospital because I couldn't do it. Dad's was a mess and I was a mess, and Roy's like, I will drive. And we get to the hospital, which I had never gone with them ever to the hospital when my mom had to go for checkups, but it is right downtown. So we get in the parking garage and we get down. We walk down to where ICU is, and there's a waiting room right outside, and I stopped for a minute. I'm like, Dad, you going back? I just want to prepare myself. So I sat there for a minute. Dad came out and goes, are you ready? I said, yeah. And he said they want to talk to us in this one room. So we go around the corner, and we go in this room, and it's like a long meeting table. And we sat on one side, me and Dad and my cousin Roy. And the other side is just white lab coats, doctors. There's a transplant team in there and some other doctors in there. There was a whole crap ton of doctors in the room with. Going over, it's rough going. She's got a lot of things happening, and and then there was a doctor standing next to me, and a doctor came in and whispered in his ear, and I just saw the air just go out of the doctor. I'm like, oh, this is not good. And he's like, that's Dr. So-and-so. He's a gastroenterologist. That's another word that makes me shiver. And he just got done running the test on your mom that we've been waiting to hear back from. He had scoped her insides, and he said her stomach is dying, and her intestines are dying, and she's dying from the inside out, and there's nothing that we can do. And I just looked at my dad, and I'm like, Dad, we have to, I said, what happens if we unplug her from the ventilator? He says, she would probably pass pretty quickly. And I said, we have to do that. We can't leave her in there suffering. We have to do that. We have to do that. That's so. That's what we did. And I'm so thankful. It took 20 some odd minutes for her to pass away. It did not take very long. And I'm so happy about that, because some people can hang on for hours or days. You just never know. And it was very fast. And so I'm thankful for that. And we had to sign papers, and I had to start making phone calls. I had to call my Uncle Jeff, who was in the Chicagoland area on a meeting, who was trying to get to the hospital, my mom's brother. And I said, go to Grandma's house. I said, don't come here. Mom passed away. I said, go to Grandma's house. So he was going to head that direction. And then I called my mom's sister, and I said, you need to go to Grandma's house. Mom passed away. And we're going to be heading there from Chicago soon. This is probably 4:30 in the afternoon Michigan time, because it's like 3:30 in the afternoon Chicago time. And and then I called the funeral person, who I've known most of my life, and he knows my dad, and he was shocked that I was calling to talk to him about coming to pick up my mom in Chicago. He just couldn't believe it. And we set things up with him. And then I called Lizzie, and I said, make a video for me and tell everybody my mom passed away. And we had to sign papers and things. And I had gone into the room before she passed away briefly, and I couldn't do it because she did not look like I'm so glad my grandma did not see her. I'm glad Grandma didn't go to Chicago. Because I think it haunts me what my mom looked like. Because she did not look like herself. And I'm glad Grandma did not have to see that. Because it was not a pretty sight. So once they got all the paperwork done and all that stuff, we were able to leave the hospital, and we went to my cousin's and told them what happened, and we got on the road home. We got on the road to Grandma's house. So I drove, and Dad drove with me, and my cousin Roy took my mom's vehicle and followed us, and we went to my grandma's. We stayed there for a while, and we went home that night, and it was kind of a blur after that, because then you have to figure out, there's so much stuff to figure out. It's so crazy. And then people start bringing food to your house. We had so many cold cuts. I made a rule there for a while. If anybody showed up, you have to take a sandwich, because we have enough cold cuts to feed an army. People were so nice. I remember going to the funeral home, just Dad and I, before everybody got there, and there was all these flowers and plants and things. I have a slideshow of, I don't know if it's still up there, because it had music with it, so I don't know if they took it down or not, but when they brought all the flowers to our house, I made sure I set them up and took a picture of each flower arrangement that we had. But the first one I saw when I went in there was this beautiful vase arrangement with these purple flowers, and they were from Mumbai Doug and his family. And it was so cool that the first arrangement I saw was from a YouTube person. And it was so sweet. And, yeah. So today Mom would have been 63. And I know it was devastating for me to lose my mom. I just cannot imagine how my grandma felt losing her child. Today is the day my grandma became a mom. My mom was the oldest. So I just can't imagine that, outliving your child. So yeah. I know I missed a lot. It was just all so, it was crazy. It's all so blurry sometimes. And there are still days I think, what if I had made her go to the hospital sooner? You know, and you have those thoughts and you're like, you know, there's nothing you could have done, but there's always those little thoughts of, maybe there was something I could have done. I try not to think like that, but those little thoughts still come into your mind. So November 15th, 63. Huh. Dad's gone. Him and Larry left like an hour ago to go to Shipshewana. Dad got up really early this morning because my cousin Bart called late last night wanting to know if Dad would come watch Aunt Linda so he could go hunting this morning. And, because he wants to get some meat in the freezer. So Dad did that, and then Mona, his girlfriend, got home at like 8, and then Dad came up here and Larry was waiting for him, and then they left. I called Dad, I'm like, where are you guys at? He says, we're about halfway there. I said, are you going to stop at the bakery? Dad's like, I don't know. Larry's PMSing. I said, what's wrong with Larry? I don't know. He's on his period. That's all Dad kept saying. I'm like, well, they're like two grumpy old men, those two. They're going to a horse auction. Why they need to go to a horse auction, I do not know. I don't. Dad's like, Larry called and asked, and I said I would go. I said, why does he go to a horse auction? He doesn't want a horse. He just likes to watch them. I'm sure they'll go to the E&S store. I don't know where else they'll go. I'll have to see if they survive the day together. I'm feeling better today. I slept a lot the last couple days, which I think helped a lot. I took some NyQuil cough and cold last night, which helps me sleep. I have a little froggy in my throat, but other than that, it's not sore like it was yesterday morning. And I can breathe fairly well. I think I'm going to go have some breakfast. I don't know what I'm going to have. Maybe some oatmeal and watch some stuff on the DVR. I'm just going to have a blah day today. Yeah, that's it. A blah day today. Okay, I hope all that made sense of some sort. And I'm going to roll it. I will see you all later. I don't know if you'll see me tomorrow or not. I don't know. We'll have to see. Bye.